Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to audio and video mute everyone except for our speaker as we go through the program today. We're glad that you're all here joining us and looking forward to having a great program. So my name's Yvonne Rasmussen. I'm the coordinator for the UC Master Gardener program in Napa County. And we are so happy to be hosting these talks through the Napa Library. Napa County Library is hosting us to do these presentations for you. So I want to introduce Napa County Library staff, Stefna Pramick, and she can welcome you.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight and to listen to the program, Putting Vegetables to the Test. I have a book that I like to recommend to you. It's called Kitchen Gardening for Beginners. You can kind of see it, but it's kind of, I don't know if you can really see it, but there it is. It's by Simon Ackroyd, and there's a wealth of information in this tiny book. There's 10 steps to prepare your plot, 10 steps to preparing your plot, and then growing fruits and vegetables, and all sorts of other projects. It's got great images in here, and then it will take you through all the steps you need to build your garden. And then it goes into the various different vegetables, and it's got some really wonderful images there. That was broccoli and cauliflower, pumpkins, bell peppers and chilies. It's all in here. So if you're interested, please stop in at the library. It's Kitchen Gardening for Beginners by Simon Ackroyd. And we have many other books for fruits and vegetables and other gardening issues that you might have in our home and garden section. So I invite you to come to the library at 580 Coombs Street in Napa. And then we have branches in Calistoga, American Canyon, and Yountville. Okay, Yvonne.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Master Gardeners. We are glad you're here today to join us. We're going to be talking about our vegetable tests that we do. But first, I want to tell you a little about who we are as Master Gardeners. We are volunteers. We're a volunteer organization run by the University of California Cooperative Extension Office here in Napa. We're locally based. And we use research-based information to give out to you, the public, to help you become more successful at gardening. And our purpose really is to get that information out to you. And so part of the way we do that is through these kinds of presentations. We also do newspaper columns and other events. And as part of our university feedback, we really would like to get feedback from you about how you enjoyed this program and what you learned, and if you're applying that to your home garden. To do that, our statewide program is going to send a follow-up survey. It comes in about 2 to 3 months from now. So hopefully you've learned something and then you go out and do it in your garden. And so it's a follow-up survey to see if you've applied any of the information we've given you. If you want to opt out of this survey, it's a really short survey. I have to say it only takes a few minutes, and we would love to have your information. It's anonymous. But if you want to opt out, just type your name in the chat, and the chat you can find usually at the bottom of your screen or the top, depending on the type of device you're using. And just type in your full name. You don't have to put your email because we will have that in our resources, and that will give you an opt-out. I just wanted to remind everyone that if you do want to ask questions during the program, we love getting questions. Just type them also in the chat. We will have a question and answer segment at the end of this program. And we'll hopefully address most of your questions as we go through the program, but we love to get questions. So do type in your questions. We'll try to address as many as we can. And if we might have to run a little over time, but I don't think we will, but we will try to get to all your answers. So I'm going to turn it over now to our guest presenters today to talk about putting vegetables to the test with Master Gardeners. And it's going to be Donna Woodward and Pat Hitchcock who are presenting today. So I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Donna Woodward, and Pat and I are members of the Napa Master Gardeners Field Test Group. This is a Master Gardeners project that's been going on for many years. And what we do is do field trials of vegetables. We'll pick one vegetable and then we pick 3 varieties of that same vegetable. And we all plant the same thing at the same time, just with the idea that we will be able to see what's the most successful, or if one of these varieties is better than the others. We keep track of our experiences. We quantify anything we can, like days to germination, days to production, and how much produce we get, and what tastes the best, and so on. And then we write a report to share with people and hope we can help them decide what will work best in their garden. There are currently about 10 or 12 of us who are regular participants. Sometimes we get a clear winner for one of these trials, and sometimes not. Sometimes we don't agree. Sometimes there really isn't that much difference. But whatever happens, we always learn a lot. Learn about growing this particular vegetable and about vegetables in general. We plant 3 times a year, once in the early spring, once in late spring, and again in late summer. Many cool weather vegetables can be grown either in planted in the fall or in the early spring. And right now we are doing a back-to-back trial of broccoli. We planted these seeds in near the end of August, this last August, and we chose 3 varieties. The first one there is called De Ciccio, kind of hard to read and hard to pronounce. It's an Italian variety. Marathon and Apollo. What we were looking for is what we thought is the optimum of broccoli, which is to produce one nice large main head. And once that one has been harvested, they send out secondary shoots of smaller heads. So you can keep harvesting broccoli for quite a while. So that's what we were looking for when we chose these seeds. We were a little surprised though with the fall crop because the Apollo was not forming heads. And when I first saw that, there's the Apollo on the left. I thought I had done something wrong. I planted my seeds too late or something. But going back to the seed catalogs, we noticed that, you see, it looks like a head there on the right with the Apollo, but actually it's a bunch of small ones banded together. And we found out later that this is actually a cross between a broccoli and a broccolini. So we missed the mark a little there on picking that variety. However, we're continuing with this, and we have the spring plants. Oh, here's an example of, these are secondary heads. These are the little offshoots. The Apollo's down there in the lower left, so you can see it doesn't look like the others. But I believe to the right of it is the De Ciccio, which are a little bit smaller. The ones on top are much nicer. That's what we were really looking for. Anyway, we will continue with this and see how we do in the spring. And once we're finished with the entire project, we will get together and compare notes and tabulate all of our data. And then one of us will write up an article that'll appear in the Napa Valley Register in the column, the Master Gardener's column. It appears every Saturday. Shortly thereafter, you can find it in this blog, which is a really great resource. The article's reprinted and they add beautiful color pictures. I was really surprised at how much that adds to an article, just to the experience of reading about it, especially with something that's as visually exciting as plants. Also, it's there. If you miss something with a newspaper, you can miss it or lose it or wish you'd saved it, but you can go to this blog at any time and do a search for a particular topic, writer, or whatever you can think of. And it's a really great resource. I recommend you try it. So then we'll go on to another cool weather vegetable. Pat?
Well, we actually did the trials of cauliflower before we did the trials of broccoli. And I think part of the reason we're doing the broccoli is that broccoli and cauliflower are very similar plants, and they grow in a similar way, and cultivation of them is similar. So it seemed like a good thing to try broccoli after our cauliflower experiences. A big difference between broccoli and cauliflower is that cauliflower is not known for sending out secondary shoots. And so when you plant cauliflower, it can be a positive thing that it only produces one head and then it's done. So when the crop has produced its head, you can clear that space and plant your next crop. And that can be a big advantage in a small garden where space is at a premium. Now the three kinds, I don't have seed packets for these three types of cauliflower because the seed packets didn't have pictures on them, but you can see there are three colors. We chose a standard white cauliflower called Amazing. We chose that beautiful pinky purple one is called Graffiti. It is a hybrid for sure. And the green one with the interesting spirals is a kind of broccoli or kind of cauliflower called Romanesco, and this variety is Veronica. And one thing to share with you about both cauliflower and broccoli is they do best when they are grown in the cool seasons, to mature in the cool season. And they also do best if they get plenty of light and not plenty of fertilizer, but the right amount of fertilizer. So we started with the cauliflower, the spring planting. The seeds were actually started in February in order to have plants to set out in March. The fall planting, the seeds were started in August in the hopes that we would plant them out in the middle of September or maybe the end of September. And this is what the sprouts look like. Once the seeds sprout and they start to have leaves, they get moved into these bigger pots and they get a weekly dose of half-strength liquid fertilizer to keep them growing well. And this is what the seedlings look like when they're really close to being ready to be transplanted. Good, healthy plants. And this was the spring planting. I love this picture because that cauliflower plant was in a 4-inch pot. And I took pictures to show you what the roots look like. They have filled the pot, but they aren't too crowded. They're not circling around. This is a 6 weeks from starting the seed plant, and it's ideal for transplant. Here's what I look like when I'm transplanting cauliflower into the garden. You might recall that 2020, we were all under lockdown. So my handy spouse took pictures. I also want to point out on this picture that cauliflower and broccoli are both large plants. They're recommended to transplant out about 2 feet apart. And those plants start out fairly small. Another opportunity, if space is a problem in your garden and you want to plant several of these plants, is to plant a quick and shorter crop, a quick and quicker growing small crop in between. And in this particular season, I planted baby bok choy between the cauliflower. The baby bok choy was ready in about a week or a month after it was set out, at which point the cauliflower had grown enough that it would have shaded them out anyway. So that was dual cropping of that space. For the spring, and I need to show you this because this is what we call row cover. It's a very lightweight polyester fabric, for lack of a better term, but you don't buy it at the fabric store. It comes from garden supply places. And I have to cover my cauliflower and similar plants to keep the birds from eating them. This row cover is also helpful with some other pests, and I will remind you of that at the end of this section. So the spring planting pretty much was ready to harvest in May. This shows the scale. That was my very first white cauliflower in May of 2020, and it almost weighed 2 pounds. I was very excited about that. Here's what the plants look like in the garden. This is the amazing cauliflower. The fall crop, oh well, this is what the graffiti looks like. And I think the graffiti is kind of wonderful because the leaves curl up and kind of protect the head. You have to kind of look around for it. And then here's what Veronica looks like growing in the garden. The spring crop in my garden and for most of us was pretty much ready to harvest all around the same time. I had 3 weeks of cauliflower from something like 18 plants, which is a lot of cauliflower to eat for 2 people. You can bet that anyone who came to my house got to take some cauliflower home. The fall planting was interesting because even though we set the plants out in September, hoping to get cauliflower sooner than the end of the year, most of us did not start getting the cauliflower until January and even into February. So the fall planting was helpful in the sense that you didn't get all of the crop at once. It was more spread out. Part of that is probably because there's less light in the fall than there is in the spring. As we all know, in the fall, days are getting shorter. In the spring, the days are getting longer. So you just have less light. It takes longer for these plants to mature. We didn't have any clear-cut favorites. Every single person who grew the cauliflower thought it was worthwhile and enjoyed the taste. Some people didn't like the purple cauliflower because they thought it didn't seem like it was real cauliflower. But that's a matter of color rather than taste. They all were delicious. There are some common problems across the board. Aphids, I don't know of any gardener in Napa County who's never seen an aphid, but in case you haven't, this is aphids on a broccoli leaf and on a broccoli stem. We recommend that you use a stream of water to hose aphids off. If the colony, as we call it, gets to be too overwhelming, then remove the whole thing and dispose of it in your yard waste. The aphids are a problem if you don't pay attention to them, but if you hose them down regularly, you should be able to get a successful crop. There are a couple of other common pests that are flying pests, and they're very common here. On the left, you see the white butterfly with the black spot. This is the imported cabbage worm. This is a European pest that came over at some point. It flies around in the daytime, and guess what? I've already seen this butterfly in my garden this spring, in February. So it's already active, and I have to keep my eyes on my next planting. It lays the egg on the underside of the leaf. And I'm telling you, when I was growing the plants on my deck before they were put out into the garden, I watched one of these butterflies fluttering around the plants. And it was in the blink of an eye that they laid an egg. And I knew I had to keep an eye out for them. You can find the eggs if you're really good at it, or if you don't find them, they hatch into these little green worms that are the same color as the plant. And I did find several at the 1/4 inch stage and the 1/2 inch stage. A small plant and a cabbage worm are not a good combination, though they can do a lot of damage very quickly. Row cover keeps these butterflies from reaching the plants. And that's why I wanted you to see that picture of row cover. A similar kind of problem is the moth. Of course, it's flying around at night. And the caterpillar of this moth is like an inchworm. It moves along like an inchworm. Again, it's the same color as the leaves. It can do a lot of damage. But if you keep your eyes open and watch for them, you can remove them and we'll be fine. So again, broccoli and cauliflower are both cool season crops, but let's move on to a different crop, and I'll turn it back over to Donna.
Well, this is another cool season crop. This is snap peas, grow in the very early spring. Snap peas are also called edible pod peas. These are the ones that you can eat the whole thing. You eat the shell as well as the peas. We've planted 3 varieties: Super Sugar Snap, which is a green variety; Sugar Magnolia was a purple one; and Opal Creek is a yellow one. The they're climbers. Well, first of all, here they are just getting started. These are covered with cages to protect from birds. Any kind of cage is helpful with birds and other critters. I use them even just to keep my own cats and dogs away from things. You can have wire cages, plastic cages, and of course, row covers. It's important to protect everything. There are bush varieties of snap peas, but we grew only the pole variety. They are great climbers. And here we have, these are actually two separate bushes grown side by side, and they've climbed all over each other. The white flowers are the green variety, and the purple flowers are the purple ones. We kept track, this is another example of a purple one. Very pretty flowers and pretty beans, or peas rather, excuse me. This is the sugar magnolia is what it's called. Then you can see one of the purple pods in front. They aren't entirely purple. They were partly green and partly purple. Here we have all three varieties harvested. The Opal Creek on top, you can see they're smaller. They were a bit smaller and thinner. And I think the pod itself was a little bit thinner shelled. And I didn't find those to be, at first I didn't think they were very good at all, but I think I was picking them a little bit too young. With the ordinary peas that you shell, they're sweeter when they're small. So I was thinking the same thing would apply to these sugar snap peas. And I found that wasn't the case, especially with the Opal Creek. Once they filled out a little more, they tasted sweeter. Nevertheless, out of this, the purple ones were good, really good too. But the green ones, I think everybody liked the best. They are really sweet and crisp and tender to munch into. We took some of our, okay. Here's an example. Yeah, that's okay. It was one other thing I was going to bring up, but it doesn't matter. We'll go on to the size of them. The top one is a mature Opal Creek. The bottom one has gotten too big. And that's something you really have to watch for, because once they get to where you can see the peas inside bulging out like that, the pod itself will start getting tough. That string down the center gets tough, and the peas inside get starchy tasting. So this is an example. And here's an example of the sugar magnolia. The one on the bottom is full enough to be good. The one on top, the way it's bulging at the end on the right side there, is an indication that the peas inside are getting too big and it won't be as good. This is the best example. You can see the bottom one. It was hard to get them arranged so you can really see them. The bottom one is just right, and the top one is too full. These were my favorite. These super sugar snap really are super. I couldn't walk past a bush without popping one in my mouth. They're so good. We did keep track of which ones we grew in the ground and in beds. And we found little difference there. We also noted which ones were in full sun and which were in part sun. And that made a big difference. In fact, there was double the germination rate in the full sun, which probably had to do with the warmth of the soil. But it brought to mind the fact that the sun is so important, and especially with the winter planting, because we already have short days. So if you have shade creeping in on that as well, you might have problems because you don't get enough sunlight. My own garden stretches from east to west, and it has full exposure on the south side. There's nothing in front of it except a field. So I was complacent, think, I have full sun, I don't have to worry. But I didn't realize over the years until just recently that in the winter, there's a shade over most of the western side of my garden. And that's because there's a hillside to the west of my garden. It's a ways away, but it's covered with trees, tall trees, redwoods and fir trees. And they have grown a lot over the past 10 years. And now their shade is really, the sun is behind those trees at a pretty early hour in the winter. So I have to keep planting farther and farther east. Just something that you should be aware of, that things can change in your garden. You have to observe if any of your surroundings have changed. One person noted that hers that she planted in January actually did better than those we planted with our trial in February. And that may have just been her garden, or it may be that that was last year, it was a warm year, and this year is too. Maybe it's permanent or maybe not, but one thing we've learned is that here in Napa Valley, even though it's a small valley, but people's gardens can vary a great deal. There's just a lot of variation in soil types, hills, flat, whether you get the fog or whether you're up valley and it's warmer. What you have to know your own garden and pay attention to what's going on around it. And now we can talk about some warm weather vegetables.
That would be my turn again. Yes. Cucumbers. We decided to try 3 kinds of cucumbers. So the one on the left, the Suyataro cucumber, is a hybrid Japanese type. Lemon cucumbers are an heirloom variety that are very prolific, as we discovered. And the Bite Alpha cucumber is a smaller green cucumber. To me, it's more like the kind of cucumber you might pickle. It's about 4 or 5 inches long. We decided to grow these in the summer, and they're warm season crops, so you really don't get started with these until May. And that's when we planted them. They sprouted readily in the soil. Some people will start these ahead in pots, but it's all most of the time it's recommended you start them straight in the ground. They want warm soil to sprout, but they also want warm soil to grow well, and that's what they look like. All 3 of these cucumbers were vining types. So the picture on the left is a very simple A-frame wire cage thing that I made out of, I think, concrete reinforcing wire. I just cut it in half and then hinged it and made a little A-frame. It's only about 2 feet tall. And on the left you can't see the trellis. That's because the cucumbers are growing all over it. Now, for this trial, we decided everybody should try to grow 2 plants of each kind of cucumber. Well, that was very exciting because we got a lot of produce out of those cucumbers. They planted in May, production started in July. And at least in my valley floor garden, I had cucumbers all the way through September, 3 months worth of cucumbers. And I very carefully counted them as I harvested them and weighed them. And I got a lot of cucumbers. You really don't need to grow 6 cucumber plants unless you want to do a bunch of pickling or something like that. Everyone who grew the cucumbers thought it was a worthwhile harvest, worthwhile use of space in their gardens. There was no clear favorite, although I think about half of the master gardeners mentioned the Bite Alphas as a cucumber that they would grow again. Some people were surprised to discover that they like lemon cucumbers. Part of the issue with cucumbers is, just like with peas and a lot of other vegetables, you need to harvest them at the right time. If you wait to harvest lemon cucumbers until they are yellow, like the picture on the left, they're going to be very seedy and a little bit tough and not as wonderful of a fruit. Someone I know who was visiting me, I gave lemon cucumbers to. She said she didn't really like them. I said, well, why don't you try some of these? And I picked some small ones that were not yellow yet. They were just pale green. And she reported back that her family really does like lemon cucumbers, which is a good thing. I think most of the master gardeners got more lemon cucumbers by number than of the other two. The picture with the cucumbers on the plate, the long, thin green cucumbers, those are the Japanese cucumbers. We had fewer of them by number, but we still had quite a few to eat and enjoy. These were beautiful, long slicing cucumbers. And then the Bite Alpha, in contrast, is about 5 or 6 inches long, and that's a good size for that. The picture again on the left is not one of those varieties, but it shows what an overripe cucumber looks like. It starts to get yellow in this yellow in the skin, and the seeds develop and develop more of a more crunchiness. I like my cucumbers not to have such big seeds, and that's why I pick them young, pick them at the right time. The other thing, no one in their trials reported bitterness in their cucumbers. I don't know if that's because these varieties are not known for bitterness, or if people, or if we all had such fabulous growing conditions, we didn't have bitterness. You can get bitterness in cucumbers if they're not irrigated enough. And some varieties of cucumbers are much more prone to bitterness in any case. The bitterness in a cucumber starts at the stem end of the cucumber. And if you find that you've got cucumbers that are bitter, you might try cutting off the bitterness, because they get less bitter the closer they get to the blossom end, if that makes sense. So and you can also, if bitterness is a problem in your garden for any reason with the cucumbers, look for varieties of cucumbers that say they're not bitter. And as an aside, the lemon cucumbers are never bitter. I have never heard of anyone saying that lemon cucumbers were bitter. So this was a very successful trial. All of us got plenty of cucumbers. We didn't all get all of them. Sometimes a gopher or something will eat plants. But if you do get the plants growing up to production size, you're going to have more cucumbers than you know what to do with. So we're going to go to another warm season trial that we've been doing.
Okay, Romano beans. These are sometimes called Italian beans. They're a type of green bean, but compared to an ordinary green bean, they are much longer, and they're kind of wide and flat. They're delicious. We planted them first in the summer of 2019, and then we liked them so much we tried again with three different types in 2020. The first trial was the green Helda, was a pole bean. The Perpiat is a bush bean, a purple one, and the Golden Gate was also a pole bean. And then the next year we got another green pole green called Musica. The colors weren't actually that much different between these two green beans. It's just the photographs. And we had a pole purple, the violet potted stringless is a purple one, and the bush bean was a yellow one, the Capitano. Both years we ended up preferring the green ones. Although the Golden Gate was very similar to the Helda, I believe, in flavor, it was close. They look really good cooked together. It makes a very attractive dish putting them together. When it comes to cooking purple beans, however, they lose their color and they turn a kind of a bluish green. It's not an appetizing color, and I don't really see the point of growing a pretty color if it's not going to look good on the plate as well. We planted in early May. They need warm soil. Unlike the fall planting, where you have a fairly narrow time period in which to plant, with these warm weather vegetables, you can plant you know, from May to almost July to plant beans. They are climbers, they need support, and they need a pretty sturdy support because it's a heavy crop. Here we have a wooden trellis. The center one is something called a tuteur or tuteur, if you're going to, it is a French word. That's like a tower that grows really tall. On the right, we have a cage. They will grow very tall. And if you have a tower that's tall, you might have trouble harvesting them all the way up. You might need a ladder to do it because they will just keep on growing. Here's a tutor that's covered, and then some, I think. The bush varieties also usually need some support because, especially with something like these beans, they're fairly heavy and the fruit itself is long. So there are some advantages to either one, whatever your preference is. You can get more produce per square foot of garden space with the pole beans because they're vertical. But again, if you have trouble getting high up or you don't mind bending over to pick on the ground, you can grow the bush beans. In both of our trials, the bush beans came out least popular, but in all fairness, we didn't try any green bush beans. So maybe the real difference was the green. It seems the green was better. It was with the pole beans, so maybe a green bush bean would be better than the purple and yellow that we tried. We had a picture, there it is. Yeah, I was saying this is the Helda and Golden Gate cooked together. And you can see that does make an attractive dish. I think that's the main reason for having the yellow. There wasn't really a great deal of flavor difference there. So again, as with the peas and cucumbers, picking them at the right size is critical. The one on the bottom here is too big. When they start bulging, the beans inside are bulging there, it's going to be tough. The ones on top were picked quite nice and young, and they're really delicious at that size. What else? I had another thought. Oh yes, they are all classified as stringless. These are stringless varieties of green beans. But if they're allowed to get too large, the strings down the seam will get tough, and you'll have to, pull them out or something, or you'll have a hard time chewing them. So harvest when young and tender. We loved growing these. They were extremely prolific. They germinated well. We planted 10 seeds of each variety. In the first year, I had 29 plants because I only lost one. And there were so many beans. I didn't know what to do with them all. I was giving them away by the bag full. We had a few insects, really hardly any. They were very easy to grow. Earwigs was one thing that was found, and those were dealt with by using a rolled up newspaper to capture them and get them away. I had something ate lower leaves of mine up to about 3 feet tall, and I don't know what it was, but I just threw some tulle over the whole row and the leaves grew back and the critters didn't come back. That's another cover that's inexpensive. You can get at a fabric store, is tulle. I use it quite a bit. It's not as sturdy though, and it doesn't last very long as a purchased shade cloth. But one other thing about beans and peas, both are really good to grow in your garden and rotate through your garden because they are legumes and they fix nitrogen in the soil. So it's very good for your soil to plant them. Okay, And we have one last trial to talk about.
I hope you're still with us. You can tell that Donna and I love growing vegetables, and the field trials group allows us to experiment a lot. And we're still in the middle is not quite the right word. We're growing lettuce for a year. The variety that we chose is called Little Gem, and it's the darling of some of our fancy restaurants. Sometimes on a restaurant menu, the salad will say, you know, Little Gem salads, Little Gem something or others. That's because Little Gem is a small romaine. It makes a crunchy, the leaves are pretty crunchy, but full size, it's only going to be 6 or 8 inches tall, instead of a traditional romaine, which can be a very large plant. The largest romaines will grow 18 inches tall if you have the right conditions. So the deal with the lettuce is, we said, let's grow lettuce every month of the year to see what we learn from trying to grow lettuce every month of the year. And we chose the Little Gem because it's a well-known and popular eating variety. The thing about lettuce is that it is another one of our cool season crops. So growing it in the warm season is going to have challenges. The good news is it's supposed to be ready in about 58 days. I like to round off. It's supposed to be ready to eat in 2 months. So one thing I have discovered is that is a little bit optimistic, even in the warm weather. This picture shows the little cell pack down at the bottom of the picture is a month's worth of seeds that I sowed. And at this point, those little seeds have been growing in the cell pack for about a month. Inside this cage, which is just a repurposed cage that was lying around my house, you'd think I was an old farmer or something. Those seedlings are 2 months old. Now remember, the seed packet says the lettuce will be ready in 2 months, but that's not been the case in my garden, because those plants inside the cage are really as small as they look. They're only maybe 4 inches across, and that's not the size I expect from a head of lettuce. Here we have again, this lettuce is only, it was seeded on October the 6th, transplanted out a month later, and this picture was taken a month later. They're still not full grown at 2 months. They're looking really good. And by the way, that white fabric, that's row cover. I have birds who like all kinds of things that grow in my garden, so I can't grow lettuce very well if I don't protect it from the birds, and that's what the row cover is about. And there you see the picture. The row cover can just lie on top of the lettuces and protect them from birds. But this is what we're looking for. This lettuce is 90 days. And this is the size I'm harvesting it, because much longer than this, the lettuce is just going to it's going to show signs of being old. The lower leaves will be dying and all of that. So these pictures I've been showing you of the lettuce have all been the ones that have been growing in the winter. But I'm having a different experience with the lettuces I've been growing in the warm season. And one thing I learned after we started this project is that lettuce seeds will go into summer dormancy. They will actually the seeds will go dormant if they are too warm. They will not sprout, and they will just lie there. And we have found, particularly our May and June and July sowings of these lettuces, that sometimes it takes the seeds a very long time to sprout. And I attribute that to the warm weather setting those seeds up, and they just refuse to sprout if it's too hot. In no month, never have I had any of these lettuces ready to grow, ready to eat in 60 days. So that is kind of what I've learned. And I think that's variety specific. I do think as we move forward into this year, I'll be growing lettuce every month because I have not had any trouble getting it to sprout. But I'm going to try some different varieties of lettuce. Some of the open leaf varieties, leaf lettuces, are a little less picky about things. And I'm going to be growing those kinds of lettuces as well as the little gem. This is what we want the little gem to look like. There it is on a plate. That's a lovely, successful head of little gem lettuce for dinner. And it was also not the same head, but it's also attractive to slugs, especially in the spring. And when I brought this head of lettuce into the kitchen, the slug hung around so I could take its picture. The earwig fell out and ran away. But I do find slugs and earwigs in my lettuce. The little holes in the upper leaf can be earwig damage or slug damage. When slugs, the excrement of slugs is kind of slimy and green looking. But when I open up the leaves of this lettuce, I'll find some, we call it frass. What insects do is they poop out what we call frass. Earwig frass looks like little specks of dirt. And so even though the earwig ran away and I could not capture it on camera, I did find the frass from the earwig in here. I'm not as worried about the earwig on a mature head of lettuce because I think the earwig is in there trying to find something else to eat. But of course, slugs and snails do a lot of damage. If you need to bait for slugs and snails, we always recommend iron phosphate based snail bait. We do not recommend the kinds of snail bait that are based on on metaldehyde. Those baits will always come with a warning that says they're toxic to animals and wild creatures and children. So you don't want to use that in your garden, especially not in an edible garden. But the iron phosphate based baits seem to work pretty well. And of course, look at your garden a lot. And if you start seeing slugs and snails, you can do a lot by picking them off, especially first thing in the morning or late in the evening. So we've learned a lot over the years by growing all these different vegetables. We hope that you will take advantage of what we've learned by asking us questions and following our blog and all of that. I believe that Yvonne mentioned this slideshow is being recorded and it will be posted to our website later this week. The way you find the recording and also the resource page, which I'm about to show you, is to go to the events tab on our website. And then when you click on that, you find the references and slides, workshops and events. And there's a lot of material there. But if you know this, you know when this program happened, you can find it very easily. And we're going to take a look at all the questions you have, but I want to show you the resources. And this is also going to be posted as a separate document to the website, so you don't have to be madly writing down all these websites. There are two blog posts, one specifically about the cauliflower and one specifically about the Romano beans. And then we always recommend the UC IPM for dealing with the variety of pests you might encounter. And UCANR has a wonderful website called the California Garden Web that has a whole segment on vegetables, and I also highly recommend that. So again, this resource page will be posted later this week under the events tab. And then I hope one of my colleagues has been looking at the chat to see what questions there are and see if Donna and I can answer those.
Yes, Pat, we have lots of questions. So the first one that was in is a general question about, does Napa have a community garden? And if so, how does one join?
Well, not to my knowledge.
No.
The one community garden we had in Napa was thriving for several years, but the property is slated for, I think, low-income housing, and it is they had to ask the garden to go away. So I'm sorry, we do not have a community garden, to my knowledge.
We don't.
There
The
is
only
one.
community there's one for American Canyon, and then a few housing units have their own community gardens, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say something, Donna?
No, I don't know
Oh,
anything
okay.
about community gardens.
Okay. The next couple questions are about fertilizers. I think this is when you were talking about your fertilizing the young seedlings. And so the question was, what fertilizer do you use and what dosage for daily use on seedlings?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure I said weekly use on the seedlings, not daily. And what I prefer to use is something like fish emulsion, which is organic and also very gentle. And you use it half strength. So whatever this is liquid fertilizer, because when the plants are in their little pots, that's the easiest thing, is to give them a weekly, once a week dose of half strength liquid fertilizer. And by half strength, if it says to put a teaspoon in a gallon, then all you do is put a half teaspoon in a gallon and then give it its usual watering. And that's how I do that. And then as long as you asked about fertilizer, and I did mention that, particularly with the cauliflower and the broccoli as well, they're pretty heavy feeders. So you should always, you should know what your soil is like, but almost always those kind of crops, when you're getting ready to plant them in the garden, you need to add some kind of nutrients to give them enough, fertilizer to grow well. And again, I prefer to use organic formulations, and they're usually, the way I manage it in my own garden is to use a granular kind of thing that tells you they always have instructions. They always say, use 1 cup for so many square feet. They're talking about surface area. And when I'm getting ready to plant out plants, I will put that amount of fertilizer into the soil, on top of the soil, and then I will add a light layer of compost. I might scratch it in a little bit. I don't want to disturb the soil a lot, and water it in, and then go ahead and put my transplants into the ground.
And twice as much is not twice as good.
No, you should. We always say follow directions, and I realize I told you, but use half strength for your seedlings because they're babies. Half is okay. Twice as much is not.
So there's a question from Sylvia about, does frost affect planting in early spring?
Absolutely. Some plants will tolerate frost better than others. As an example, I'm growing broccoli and cauliflower starts right now that I seeded them. I forget when I seeded them, a month ago, and they're not ready to go into the garden yet, but I'm growing them on my deck. And those plants can tolerate frost just fine. And they have stayed on the deck through last week's freezing temperatures, and they look just fine. Simultaneously, I'm starting tomatoes and peppers to set out in the ground later in the year. Those plants do not like to be cold, and they are coming in every night to be in the warm house. They're outside in the daytime to get maximum sunlight, but they can't tolerate the cold weather. You'll find cold tolerance varies a lot with different vegetables, depending how mature they are and what stage of growth they are in. I had a beautiful stand of peas out in the garden, blooming and forming pods. I think they were the purple magnolias and the super sugar snaps. And 4 days of sub-freezing nights blasted those vines. But I was looking at the vines, so the crop, the peas that were already on there, and a lot of the blossoms are blasted by the freeze. But the lower part of the plant, it's sort of more sheltered because the other part of the plant was hanging over it. I noticed there's actually, the plant is okay. So peas are a cool season crop that are a little more sensitive to frost. The lettuces that I have in the garden, all the different stages of lettuce that I've been trying to grow, the cold is not the problem for them. Slugs, yes. Earwigs, yes. Birds, yes. Frost, not so much. So the answer is it depends, but many of your cool season plants do fine through the frost.
A couple of questions about cucumbers. One is Dan says, interesting. I have some beta alphas I need to sow. Oh, beta alphas. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. And then Sylvia was asking, what was the Japanese cucumber called?
Oh, it's called Suyataro. I think I'm saying that right.
Right.
And I believe that came from the Kitazawa Seed Company,
Mhm.
which has recently been
Yeah.
sold. But, you know, there are many, many kinds of cucumbers.
And then she has a follow-up question with how to irrigate cucumbers. How's the best way to irrigate them? How often do you irrigate cucumbers?
Well,
It depends question, right?
it depends. The rule of thumb for a vegetable garden is they need the most water in the month of July. They need, in theory, they need the least water in the middle of winter when we're getting rain, which is a joke when we're in the middle of a drought. But the cucumbers will need regular water, but they won't need as much when you first sow them in May as they will need in July. And then once you get into, believe it or not, starting towards the end of August, they need less water again, even though it might be hotter then. There's less light because the most light is June the 21st, whatever the solstice is. And so by the time you get into August and September, you have a lot less light going on. And so the plants need less water when there's less light. I use a drip system, and the cucumbers are sort of shallow rooted, so they get irrigated for a shorter period of time, but more frequently than, say, my tomatoes do. I have tomatoes on a separate line in the garden, and because they have deep roots, they get watered deeply, but less frequently. So the best thing to do is to just, whatever system you're using for watering, check by digging around down with a trowel or a little something, your hand, dig down about 6 inches to see just how far the water is going and how moist your soil is, and irrigate when it starts being dry, too close to the surface.
The Sonoma Master Gardeners have a really good page on growing food crops during drought. So if somebody wanted to like look into how to conserve water and how to really maximize what you're getting by the amount of water you use, their website. So that's the Sonoma Master Gardeners. If you just go to their site, Google them or search for them, and then they have a whole bunch of information on dealing with drought, even for food crops. There's some comments here about Elia, I'm not sorry, I'm saying your name right. I'm sorry. I have grown little gems. They're delicious. And cute. I'm sorry.
Elahe.
Elahe. Okay. Elahe said she's grown the little gems. She really enjoys them. And she harvested lettuce last year, but only took off the leaves. And so she has little baby lettuces popping up everywhere from the seeds. And then she and someone else asked about your chicken fence, your chicken wire fencing. They wanted to build something similar with PVC pipe.
Oh, you know what? That was a cage. Well, I had chickens years ago, many years ago. And I would get new chicks every spring. And I had a Banty that would mother them. But you can't just take a bunch of baby chicks and throw them into a chicken yard with a bunch of mature hens, because they'll peck them. So I had that funny little cage to put the mother hen and the babies in, so they could sort of be in with the other chickens, but protected. But it's been a long time since I had the chickens, and that was just out there. And I just took one side of it off and put it over the lettuces. But I have to tell you, I should confess, those lettuces in that picture, 2 days later, something had gotten in there and eaten them all down to the ground. And I don't know if it was a little bird that got through the holes, if it was a rat or a mouse. I don't know.
So you might want to use the smaller holes if you were going to do something like that. Use the smaller grade.
I find the row cover is really, really easy to do on lettuce, and you can just use a little scrap of it. So
I'm seeing that we're almost out of time and there's still a bunch more questions. Elahe asks again about brands for slug bait. And I have to say that we don't generally recommend brands. You want to look for something with an active ingredient that's listed as iron phosphate.
Iron phosphate, right.
Right. Super informative. Thank you very much. Will you have other seminars via Zoom? This is an easy plug for our other programs. We are doing food growing forums on the second Sunday of every month. And those are all being done by Zoom. Some of our library presentations in the future are going to be by Zoom, but not all of them. But you can check our website anytime and find out what's happening. We do try to tell you whether it's by Zoom or in person. And I just want to read this one from Emily. This presentation was amazing and inspiring for a rookie gardener. Do you have any local nurseries you recommend for getting high quality plants as transplants, not seeds? When should I plant summer favorites like tomatoes? And finally, any recommendations for people that can help get an irrigation system set up? A lot of questions all at once.
You know, I would, in terms of when to plant, I would direct you to find one of our planting calendars on our website. We have 2 or 3 different versions of vegetable planting calendars, and they're very helpful. They're very helpful. You have to know if it's a cool season plant or a warm season plant, and then those calendars will tell you when's a good time to plant them. We don't.
Yep, it's coming up for warm season. A lot of them won't go in for another month or so at least. So you got to hold back just a little. And then there's a question here about New Jersey tomatoes. I have no experience with that. Anybody ever grown those or tried them?
No, never heard of them.
Never have either. But there are so many varieties of tomatoes. It's overwhelming when you start looking into tomatoes. You definitely want to try to grow the ones that are going to suit what you want, and be sure you're aware of your microclimates too, because there are some that are adapted to a little cooler places and things like that.
And we have several tomato workshops and library talk coming up.
We do. And it looks like we're done with time here. So there's a couple more questions. Those folks that we haven't got to your questions yet, if you want to stay on another minute or two, we will deal with those. Just a couple more here. But thank you everyone for coming. If you need to head out, because I do see it is 8 o'clock now. Thank you so much for coming today. We again thank our hosts from the library. We will be doing a program the first Thursday of every month year round with the library. And like I said, some will be by Zoom and some will be in person as we go forward into our new environment and hopefully better conditions. So
and next April, it will be tomato small talk. How to grow great tomatoes in containers. So that's April 7th from 7 to 8.
Yeah, so that's going to be a great presentation to learn more about tomatoes. We can ask if anybody else has grown that particular tomato. Someone is mentioning that the city of Napa has a community garden planned at the end of Garfield. And that is true. They are intending to have a small community garden in that Garfield Park plan. Do you start your seeds out on your deck? I start them inside and have trouble with gnats, those fungus gnats probably.
Oh, you know, I don't. The seeds get started in a fairly controlled situation, you know, under a plastic dome, and if appropriate, with a heat mat under them. But the minute they sprout, well, maybe not the minute, but as soon as I notice that seeds have sprouted, then I don't have a good way to light them except by putting them out on my deck. And my deck is the way I go in and out of my house. So once seeds sprout, they go on the deck to get maximum sun. If they're cool season plants, they just pretty much stay out there. If they're warm season plants and it's cold, I move them in and out of the house a lot. I have not had trouble with gnats, and I would wonder if you're having trouble with gnats, if you're keeping the soil too moist. I'm just wondering.
Also, if you're using a sterilized soil for your seedlings, you probably shouldn't have the gnats coming out. That's older soil. They'll lay their eggs in the soil and then they'll come out. I have them in my house plants, and I know it's because I have older soil.
Well, and that is a good point. I start seeds in seed starting mix. That is, I'm actually making my own these days with that's coir and sand and mostly coir, which is a substitute for peat, and then a little bit of sand and a little bit of vermiculite or perlite. And that's a very, very inert kind of soil. There's nothing nutritious about it. And that's what I start the seeds in. So they get up potted pretty quickly. Once I start them in little cell packs or something, and they get moved up into 4-inch pots very rapidly.
Yeah. Aleja asks another question. I'm not sure where you're from. She said, I will see if the UCMB Master Gardener.
Yes, that's University of Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay Master Gardening Program.
okay,
I
okay.
graduate soon.
Oh, nice.
But I really like the idea of testing vegetables, and I don't know if we have that. I would love to set that up here in our group. I came across a very hip type of seed company that started with 3 people. One is a chef, the other was a vegetable scientist or plant scientist, and the other one was an investor, and they call it Row 7. So I've tried their beans. That's just testing. That's how they actually sell it. They do say that it's just right now at the testing period. And then their black Roma tomato, and also their 828, if I'm saying 858 squash. So a lot of thought went into these to create them to be just flavorful enough for the chef and good investment for the investor, and the scientists worked on them. And they've been really, really successful. I planted them last year and they all grew really well. I can't wait to share some of that experience in a setup like the platform that you have.
Nice. Thank you for that information. I was trying to think, I was racking my brain, what does MB stand for? So that makes sense. So thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know the Santa Clara Master Gardeners in the past have done a lot of field trials, because when you look through their website at specific vegetables, they'll say, well, we did, in 2017 when we grew these in our, they have a good garden, not a public garden, but a good master gardener demonstration garden. And they've done trials of things like melons and other things too. So what we do is not especially scientific. It's more to see how other home garden, if there's 8 or 10 of us in Napa doing these trials. I know Donna lives on the mountainside. I live on the valley floor. Some of our gardeners live up valley, which is a little warmer. Some of our master gardeners live in the Carneros region, which is a lot cooler. And we're mainly trying to see what pitfalls might happen for any home gardener in growing these various vegetables that we're trialing.
Well, thank you. That's all the questions. There's just a couple more thank yous on here. So for those of you that hung in there, thank you for staying and hearing the rest of the questions, and lots of great questions tonight. Wonderful program. Thank you so much to our 2 presenters and to our hosts, and we'll see you all next month, I hope. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.